Yes, sir. All right, good evening, everyone. Please, you can hear us from online. From office, you can hear us so that we can begin this session.
I can hear you from this side. Good evening, but it's not very clear. You are not very clear. It seems you are far from the microphone.
Can you hear me better now, sir?
Okay, I think you are closer to the mic now. It's better. It's
All
really
right.
better.
All right. So this session is titled Defending Democracy in Africa, Challenges and Options, sponsored by the Social Science Research Council. And the session is going to be chaired by Akim Onopajo, National Institute for Legislative and Strategic Studies in Nigeria. So, Mr. Kim, I'm going to make you a co-host of this session. In the event that we have issues transmitting from here because of network, the session is not going to be interrupted. You can always continue virtually. Is that okay, sir?
That's okay, but do we have a technical person to?
Yes, the technical person is going to be on
slides?
ground to attend to any issues that you might.
Hold on, please. Do you have the slides with you over there to share on our behalf?
You can.
The
Can you share
presentation
from your
slide.
hand?
Okay.
You can share from your hand. You'll be allowed
I have
to
them
share.
here. Okay. Let me. I think before we start the session, I will have to download them in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Alhassan, Issa, I'm not sure if you submitted your presentation slides. Good afternoon. It's afternoon from this side of Nigeria. Huh?
You mean I
Hello?
should share my presentation slide with you?
Yes.
Can you please
Hello,
send to me
Kim.
so I can? Yes. Can you hear me?
Hello, Kim.
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear
Okay,
you
you know
from here.
what's going to happen? Hello? Can I hear?
Yes.
Hello, Kim. Are you saying I should share my presentation with you?
Yeah, send it to me. Send it to my email. Can you mute from your side?
All right.
There is some noise coming from the side.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Kim, please, if you could kind of drop your email for me in the chat box.
Okay, I will do that. Others too can send to me. I have Darius presentation slides. I have the presentation slide from Linet. Let me just confirm what I have with me. I have from Linet. Yes, Darius, Linet, and my own presentation. Others are not with me. Please, I have my mail now. If you could kindly send to me. Okay, so that's my email. You can send your slides to me so that I can project from this side. So good evening, everyone. It's evening here in Nigeria. So I know there are people joining us from other parts of Africa, and I think from other Can you mute yourself? We started our presentation there. Yes. So good evening, everyone, once again. So you are welcome to the Social Sciences Research Council, the SSRC session. And the theme that the panel intends to unravel is the issue around defending democracy in Africa, challenges and options. So the main objective of this panel is to examine issues around recent waves of democratic backsliding that we're experiencing in Africa. So we want to understand the reasons why we have seen a gradual decline of democracy in Africa. And we are also going to try to look at the options that are available for us in terms of strengthening and deepening democracy in Africa. So we have 5 presentations under this panel. The first presenter is myself, Hakeem Anwaju. I am an associate professor of political science, and I am presently associated with the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies here in Abuja, Nigeria. So I'll be presenting on weak institutions and democratic backsliding in Africa, a study of the third wave of military coup in West Africa. So I have Senindile, sorry about the pronunciation, Senindile Melilo. The title of her paper is Democratic Governance and Election Transitions in Botswana, a case study of the 2024 elections and its implications for Africa's democracy. She's affiliated with the African Center for Migration and Society in the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg in South Africa. Then we have Dare Lekedo. The title of his paper is Defending Democracy Through Digital Activism, Challenges and Options for African Youth. Dare is affiliated with the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. Then Dr. Alha Implications for Livelihoods and Peaceful Coexistence. Is a research associate at the West African Center for Sheer Innovation and Research, University for Development Studies in Ghana. Then we have Dr. Lynette Hamasi Henry. She's presenting on civil society and the protection of the democratic space in Africa, a retrospective view from Kenya. She's affiliated with the Department of Government and Legal Studies in the Technical University of Kenya, Nairobi. So by the schedule that is given to us, I'm supposed to be the first presenter. But before the presentation starts, I need us to agree on the timing for this session. For each presentation, we have 1 hour, 30 minutes for the entire session. Out of that, we have, I think we've spent about 9 to 10 minutes on the introductory part of it. So because we have presentations, can we be around 25 minutes, and we can use that for questions, answers, discussions on our presentations. Are we okay with that? I want to respond on behalf of the panelists.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dari.
Yes.
Yes, we proceed now. Okay, I've seen some papers that have come in. I'm going to share.
The good swap speak a little bit louder. We are having some problems hearing you.
Are you talking to us?
Yes.
So what is the issue now?
We want you to speak a little bit louder. We are having trouble hearing you clearly.
Okay. Is that with others too? Are you also having challenge with the audio? Because I'm very close to, just let me increase the volume up. I don't think it's from the...
Professor Onopajo, I can actually hear you. I don't think there's any issue with your audio.
No, I think it's from their own side.
It's most likely from their end.
Because I'm also struggling to hear them. So I think it's a technical problem from their side. I'm very close to my laptop, and the speaker is the microphone is very close to me. So this is the title of my presentation: Weak Institutions and Democratic Backsliding in Africa, Study of the Third Wave of Military Coup. Who is going to be our timekeeper, please? I'm starting at 5:42. Once it's 5:52, please let me know so I can start rounding off.
Okay.
So this is the outline of my presentation. I have the introduction. I have conceptual analysis, democratic backsliding, concepts of third wave of military coup. I have some discussion on theories of military coup. I have a discussion on my main framework, theoretical framework, which is the institutionalist framework. Then there's a discussion of fragile state institutions in Africa. And I try to explain the connection between these fragile state institutions and the resurgence of coup in West Africa. Then we have our conclusion and recommendations. So you will all agree with me that Africa is witnessing a gradual decline of democratic values, of democratic practices, with the recent upsurge in military coup across Africa, but it's been more pronounced and more present in West Africa. West Africa is often referred to as the coup belt of the world, of the entire world. So if you look at the statistics, between 2020 and 2023, that's in Africa as a whole, we recorded about 14 coup attempts, out of which 9 was successful. So West Africa has had the highest number of coup historically and in the recent wave that we're experiencing. So what is the issue with that? The issue is that there are many attempts to explain this phenomenon of military coup and democratic backsliding in Africa. So most of these explanations in the emergent literature are focusing more on the external factors and the geopolitics of Africa as an explanation of the reasons why there is this wave of coup enveloping Africa. And the reason why most of these arguments are centered around the external factors, it's because of the rhetoric of the coup makers, which is centered around anti-imperialism, trying to challenge the long years of French imperialism, because most of them are apparently happening in former French colonies. So there is this rhetoric that they are trying to fight years of imperialism in their country. And we have also seen the involvement of Russia. We've seen the involvement somehow implicitly of United States of America in some of the coup events around the coup in West Africa, most especially. So for this reason, you see in many writings, including some that I have also done, that there's this argument around the external factors. So focusing mainly on the external factors fail to consider some of the internal factors that also drive the coup. So it's against this backdrop that I'm trying to look at the institutional sources of the democratic reversals that we are experiencing in the continent, with specific focus on the phenomenon in West Africa. So there are two major perspectives in terms of definitional perspectives of democratic backsliding. There is the first that look at it from the angle of weakening or elimination of political institutions that sustain an existing democracy. And there is the extreme version that actually sees it as a fall of liberal democracy to electoral democracy, from democracy to autocracy, or from institutionalized autocracy to personalist autocracy. So I'm much more leaning towards the second perspective that sees democratic backsliding from the angle of the fall of democracy to an authoritarian system. In this case, I'm looking at it with regards to military regime, the return of military regime in Africa. So it is safe. It is with the fall of democracy in many African states following the military takeovers, it is safe to argue that democracy is actually backsliding or retreating in Africa. Then there is this interesting concept of military coup. I think many of us political scientists, we are much more familiar with the concept of third wave of democratization, propounded by Samuel Huntington. There is also the concept of the third wave of military coup, as also argued by Andrew Atta Asamoah, a distinguished scholar in the area of peace and security. So he argued recently in a recent paper that there are three waves of military coup. Africa has experienced three waves of military coup. The first one is one that happened in the 1960s and 1970s. And this coup was the first African experience with military coup. It was mainly staged against the post-colonial leaders who failed to deliver on their promises to the African people after independence. So across Africa, most especially in the 1960s, especially in 1966. In 1966 alone, I think within about 2-3 weeks, we experienced more than 4 coups in West Africa alone. So the second is the second wave of military coup. And the interesting part of this second wave is that they were staged, most of them were staged against military leaders themselves. And the reason why this occurred at this period in time was that they used it to sack military regimes that failed to deliver on their promises for democratic transition after the 1960s and 1970s. You know, many of them came on board, and the argument was that they were coming to transition into a democratic system after failures of the civilian regime. And one thing that is also important for us to note at this point in time is that this period falls into the end of the Cold War, where we saw the global spread of democracy and the liberalization of the world. So this also affected the existing military regimes that we had in the continent. So the third wave is what we're experiencing now. In terms of periodization, Andrew said it started in 2021. Some people would argue that it started in 2020, depending on the literature and the data you are making use of. But you know, going with his own argument, it became prominent from 2021, and you know, it staged against civilian leaders that also failed to deliver on their promises for the dividends of democracy after the third wave of democratization. You know, Africans became disenchanted with the administration. So what are the main theories that are used to explain military coup generally? If you go into the literature, you know, especially the post-independence literature of African politics, that first wave of military coup, there are different theories that have been used to explain military coup. The first is modernization theory. And the argument here is that, you know, the military are the most modern or modernized institution after a civilian institution, that they are the most modernized and they are the most organized, that can deliver on the developmental aspirations of the new African states after independence. So this theory somehow justifies military intervention in politics in the post-independence era. Then we have the military centrality theory. So this is somehow, you know, linked to the other theory. And the argument here is that the military is a specialized institution with its own organizational characteristics. And this qualified, they are more nationalistic, they are more disciplined, they are less corrupt, and it gives them the better opportunity for them to run the country better than civilian institution or political elite. Then the third one is the foreign interference theory. So the argument is about geopolitical interest, about contagious effects, about imperialist goals.
Prof,
Okay, I've spent.
sorry to interrupt you.
Okay,
You
let
have
me just
actually
round.
spent
Let
10
me
minutes.
round up.
And please, can you
Let me
put
round
your
up.
presentation on slideshow mode?
Sorry,
Can you put your presentation on slideshow?
Gary, what?
Please, can you put your presentation on slideshow? I mean your slides. Can you put it on slideshow
Okay.
mode so people can see the
So they
points?
can't see my slides.
No, we can see, but we can't see the points. And it's better if it's on slideshow.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is it better this way? Is it okay this way?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, it's okay
it's
now.
okay.
From my end.
Okay, sorry about that. So my own institutional framework. Now I've looked at all these arguments. I find them useful, but I feel they fail to capture properly the current realities of military coup, or this particular third wave of military coup in Africa. So I'm bringing in the institutionalist framework. Those who propounded the theory, including Peter Evans, Dietrich, Ruchema, Thaddeus Koch-Paul. The argument is that we need to bring the state back into socio-political analysis. They frown, they criticize arguments suggesting that the society shapes politics that you find in the Marxist analysis, in the popular Marx analysis. The argument is that the social classes that the society produces are the dominant. They shape everything, including politics, including the state. So the argument of these people is that no, the state itself is an independent entity. It has the capacity to shape. It is the state that has the capacity to shape the society. So what happens in the institutions of the state can explain political behavior. And I'm using this as a model to explain, how state institutions can explain the new wave of military coup that we're experiencing in Africa. So let me quickly go. So background to military coup that we have experienced recently, Mali recently, in 2020 and 2021, they experienced military coup. Guinea in 2021, they had their home military coup when Alpha Conde was removed from power. Niger Republic in July 2023, President Mohamed Bazoum was forcibly removed from power by the junta led by Abdurrahman Tichani. Then in Burkina Faso, they also had two coups, one in January, one in September. So this is the trajectory of military coup, recent military coup in West Africa. So how can we use these institutional failures to explain military coup? So the first is the executive failure. So what we have seen in recent times in Africa is, we've seen overbearing, very strong executive, or very strong leaders holding the position of the executive and ending up capturing, weakening the executive to be able to function properly. So if you see in the case of Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger Republic, even Guinea, there's a disconnection between the executive and the people to the extent that the executive is unable to meet the needs of the people. There are security challenges, there is economic problem, there is security challenges affecting most of the states. And the executive is not there to be able to perform its functions. The legislature is weak. The legislature in many of these states, even in places where there are no coup, is that we have a legislature that is a rubber stamp, that is not able that are not effective in performing legislative oversight on the executive to the extent that the people in power, the executive, the leader, can easily manipulate the constitution for their third term to prolong their stay in power without any major restraint from the legislature. And there is this growing perception amongst the people that the legislature is malfunctioning and unable to strengthening democratic practices in their state. Then the judiciary is also very weak. In many of these West African states, the judiciary has not demonstrated its required independence from other arms of government. The rulings from most of the courts are reflective of the interest of the people in power. So in the case of this state that had recent military coup, the judiciary was unable, for those who elongated their stay in power, manipulation of the constitution, the judiciary was unable, to stop them from these practices. They had failed elections. The judiciary wasn't there to properly adjudicate on electoral disputes, which contributed to the disenchantment and the grievances of the people that the military eventually exploited for the coup. Then the issue of dependent electoral body. The electoral body is expected to be an umpire in the electoral process. But what we have seen is that most of the electoral bodies that exist in Africa do not have the required independence. In fact, it's interesting to note that in Mali, it is a ministry under the executive that manages elections. There is no independent electoral body. So if you have a body that is run by the executive to conduct elections, what are you expecting in such elections? So we have also state-dominated media. The media is very weak. The media is captured by the state, by the executive, and the narratives that they promote in the media are those in support of the political establishment. So dissenting voices are suppressed. I've been mute. Okay. I know my time is. Then the political parties are also very weak. The political parties are hijacked. They are not functioning properly. Opposition parties are muzzled, and this makes state capture easily achievable. So what are my recommendations? The first is rebuilding the capacity of the state legislatures, and the media and civil society must be supported and there's need to rebuild the capacity of the. I don't know why I'm being muted. I know my time is up, but I'm not supposed to be muted. So there's need for all this. There's need to strengthen the electoral body and the party system. So I think with all of this, if all of this is followed, then we might begin to see the strengthening of democracy and trust in the democratic system and the reduction in the wave of coup in Africa. Thank you very much. So that's the end of my presentation. I have, we are going to questions, comments. We are going to delay that a little bit, or discussions around, because I don't think we have others joining us. I think we only have the presenter there. So we can, have our own discussion after we have done all the presentations. So the next person to present here is let me look at Sinindile. Dr. Sinindile, are you here? Yes, she's here with us. Let me unmute her.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll share your slide shortly. So here are your slides. So you can start.
Okay. Thank you and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel discussion. As mentioned, I'm Slindile Mlilo and I am a postdoc fellow at the African Center for Migration and Society at Wits University. The title of my paper is Democratic Governance and Electoral Transitions in Botswana, a case study of the 2024 election and its implications for Africa's democracy. As already mentioned by the previous speaker, you know, for example, issues of democracy consolidation in Africa remain problematic, with a lot of citizens expressing dissatisfaction with their country's democratic systems. According to Afrobarometer, only half of the population in many African nations view their governments as functioning democracies. And this democracy is not this dissatisfaction is not unique to Africa. As global democratic ideals face increasing challenges. In the paper, I also state that in post-colonial African states, often the struggle is with election rigging, authoritarianism, and power consolidation, seen in cases of coup d'etats or leaders clinging to power despite election outcomes. However, we've seen that the case of Botswana has traditionally been viewed differently. Botswana has always been seen as a country that's an exception. For example, some observers would call it an African miracle because of stable democratic systems, economic growth over the past 58 or 59 years under the leadership of the Democratic Party at that time. So despite its reputation as a democratic success, there's also been growing discontent among the populace, and this has been marked by rising unemployment, corruption, and human rights violations over the years, which has led to significant shifts. And these significant shifts have led to the 2024 elections, which resulted in the peaceful overthrow of the Botswana Democratic Party by the Umbrella for Democratic Change. This was the first time Botswana had a change in regime over a period of 58 years. And as such, this reflected a political shift in the country's landscape. Next slide, please. I think I've already touched on this.
Yes, your research objectives.
Yeah, so I think you can move to, yes. So with this, basically the aim of this paper, in light of this overthrow by the opposition party, I'm hoping to examine Botswana's democratic evolution, analyzing factors that led to this pivotal transition, and will reflect, and the paper also reflects on the broader implications for Africa's democratic future. Next slide, please. In terms of my conceptual lens, I draw from theories of democratic consolidation and authoritarian resilience to frame Botswana's trajectory. I draw from Linz and Stefan, who emphasize the importance of institutionalized democracy with robust civil society, rule of law, and political pluralism, elements that have long been assumed in Botswana, but were increasingly hollowed out. And then I also draw from Levitsky and Wey's concept of competitive authoritarianism, which is useful in showing how formal democratic structures can coexist with entrenched power, as seen in the Botswana Democratic Party's long dominance. These frameworks help us understand how Botswana sustained a facade of what I think is a facade of democracy, and why the 2024 transition in terms of elections represents a meaningful shift towards genuine democratic consolidation. Next slide, please. So in terms of Botswana's democratic history, which I think is important to kind of like underscore and give a history of where we are coming from and where we are, is that at independence in 1966, Botswana established a multi-party democratic, was established as a multi-party democratic state. And it's one that has earned the country's reputation as one of Africa's most stable democracies in Africa, as I've said. The Botswana Democratic Party, co-founded at independence by our first president, Cesare Khama, became a predominant political party and proceeded to win every general election since 1965 up until 2019. In these 12 consecutive elections, the Democratic Party maintained its parliamentary majority and effectively marked Botswana as a one-party dominant democracy for almost 6 decades. So this hegemonic party system meant that while opposition parties existed and contested elections, real power never changed hands, a fact often noted by observers of Botswana's democracy. For instance, the Freedom House argued that Botswana, despite its democracy, was dominated as a single party between independence and the 2024 election post-independence. Next slide, please. So in addition to this contextual background and some of these issues that we're observing, there were always cracks in this democratic exception that Botswana has been come to know. Because in 2008, when there was change of presidents, in terms of Khama's presidency at that period, the 10-year period of Khama's presidency, there was a lot of democratic erosion, centralization of power, corruption, and a suppression of dissent, which alienated the youth and urban voters. And this basically exacerbated some of the frustrations on the ground, which lay, I would argue, laid the foundation for the elections that we got, the results of the election that we received in 2024. Next slide, please. So leading to this, as I said, after setting this contextual background, obviously, for the first time in many years, the Botswana Democratic Party was overthrown and a new regime was put in place, with the UDC winning 36 out of 61 seats and the BDP reduced to 4 seats. And, we had a high voter turnout with young people. And this was a breakthrough because the UDC won majority. And for the first time, as I mentioned, the BDP suffered historic losses and the transition was entirely peaceful. Next slide, please. So some of the reasons why I tried to show in this paper why the BDP lost was that this was not accidental. As I mentioned before, there were already some frustrations that were simmering on the ground due to issues that had been taking place, issues of corruption, centralization of power, et cetera, economic grievances, unemployment. And of course, the opposition unity and strategy became better. And another key pivotal reason was that young people became very actively involved. And the use of social media, was effective in terms of mobilizing the electorate and educating people around some of these issues, which also helped in terms of, garnering more support for the opposition. The role of civil and political actors also played a role in terms of highlighting some of these issues. And as I've mentioned, young people's social media mobilization also played a role in this, in terms of helping to mobilize voters in ways that traditional media could not. Next slide, please. So given this context and given the win of the opposition party for the first time, I argue in this paper that Botswana's 2024 election and peaceful power transfer carry significance well beyond its borders, resonating across Africa as part of a larger pattern of democratic change, as well as against a backdrop of challenges to democracy. Comparatively, Botswana stands apart from states like Zimbabwe or Mali, where we've seen that the case of democracy is different, and it proves, and Botswana also proves that electoral change is possible without coups or violence. Yeah, elections that illustrate that even ruling parties entrenched for decades can be removed. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? So what does the case of Botswana show in terms of implications for Africa's democratic future? I argue that this peaceful transition that we saw in the case of Botswana shows that African democracies can mature if civic institutions are strong and elections are truly competitive. And I also argue that change without violence is also achievable. Next slide, please. And to conclude, the paper also tries to highlight key lessons. And one of these is that through the case of Botswana, we can learn that parties are not invisible, that institutions matter, and that civic agency is powerful, and that reform is possible when opposition mobilizes meaningfully. So in conclusion, basically, in the paper, I'm trying to show that Botswana's election marks a turning point, not just for itself, but can serve as a lesson in what democratic resilience could look like in Africa. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sindili. Sindili, you will have to coach me on how to pronounce your name. I'm very familiar with Southern African names. I'm having a bit of challenge pronouncing this very well. So I apologize for wrong pronunciation. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'll take the next presenter. So I have Dari here. Dari's presentation should be the next. Dari, I think you sent an updated one to me just now.
Yes, Prof. I'm wondering if I can actually share my slides from here. I just sent a request. If not,
no, you wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Oh, okay. No, you
Yes.
can go ahead, Prof.
Let me share from here. Can you see this?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I think I can. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. It's evening here in South Africa. Thanks for the opportunity to make my presentation. I'll start by, as a way of introduction, and I'm presenting a paper titled "Defending Democracy Through Digital Activism: Challenges and Options for African Youth." This paper is actually a build-up on a previous publication in 2023, which interrogates the outcomes of digital activism in Africa. Please, next slide. Okay, maybe I'll just use my slides there. So it actually built up on the next slide, Prof. The next one, please. Okay, the next one.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So it's actually built upon a previous publication, and here what I'm trying to do is to establish the current state of literature in relations with what is happening empirically. So prior to 2010, there was this proposition, mostly by American scholars, on the concept of liberation regimes to liberalize, drawing from the cases of China and a case study in China and another case study in Malaysia. So this paper titled Liberation Technology by Larry Diamond actually proposes that digital information and communication technology would become liberation technologies years to come. And this paper was published in 2010. But then, contrary-wise, the next paper titled Digital Repression, which was published in 2020, explains that in recent times, liberation technologies have actually become technologies of repression. And that's as a result of the fact that authoritarian regimes and repressive leaders have learned to master use of these technologies to close regime vulnerability gap. So the point here is that if we go back to scholars who made their proposition on digital information and communication technology as liberation technology, we actually saw what these technologies did during the Arab Spring. But then in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, we begin to see some contrast, which then informed this study. So I'd like to go back to the Arab Spring. During the Arab Spring, passive use of digital information and communication technologies as tools of protest across Africa. So post the Arab Spring, then we began to experience series of protests across Africa. But then this then raises a contention, and the contention is that in recent times, protests have become not difficult to embark on, but protests have not been as potent as they used to be. And in this paper, I try to respond to the question, why is it that these protests across Africa are not as potent as they are hypothesized by the liberation scholars, scholars who hypothesize these technologies as tools of liberation. And then, so that informed the paper titled Digital Activism and Social Change in Africa, Motivation, Outcomes, and Constraints, where I discussed some of the constraints, experienced by protest mobilizers. And then in summary, I concluded that due to some challenges, digital activism in Africa, across Africa, actually results to small gains as against holistic changes in the sense of reform, restructuring of institutions, systems, and institutions that are responsible for the reasons for protest. So building on this, Prof, can you So building on this, I actually seek to answer two questions in this paper. The first one is, the first slide, please.
Is it the next one?
No, the very first one.
The very first one. So I go back.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So two questions actually. What are the challenges associated with protests in Africa, given that they have emerged as a form of political participation over time? So in Africa, we then see a situation where more youths participate in protests than in election, because over time, elections do not necessarily translate into desired outcomes in the continent. That protests have emerged as a potent, form of political participation by African youth, and then how best can we optimize protests in effecting social change in Africa? So these are the two questions underpinning this research. Prof, please, can you go to the third slide? So I would just like to discuss the contrasts between, yes, the slide, thank you. No, the previous one. The contrast between, yes, thank you. So what I call the dilemma of digital media as liberation technology. So the early 2000 scholarly proposition prior to 2010 and around 2010 hypothesized digital media as tools that can disrupt authoritarian regime, which was actually true looking at what happened during the Arab Spring, and then to some extent actually, and tool of promoting democratization, which is contentious really, because if we take a look at the aftermath of the Arab Spring, it's still an unfinished debate And then they also hypothesize that it can serve as a tool of promoting freedom and human rights, globally, and also tool of promoting social change and then breaking glass ceiling, flattening access to economic and political opportunities. But then in the contemporary era, these promises or these propositions have actually been challenged by the mastery of these same digital technologies by authoritarian regimes across, and not just Africa, globally. So the leadership of authoritarian regimes in Africa and indeed the world have learned to master the use of these same technologies that we use as tool of, demanding social change. They have learned to master the use as tool of consolidating regime stability and also promoting autocratization, which is very, very intriguing, and also promoting repression through surveillance technologies, the purchase and the deployment of surveillance technologies. And they have also mastered the use of these technologies as tool of embarking on digital repression and preserving the status quo, which is more beneficial to them. And then lastly, I then argue that as a result of all of these, digital activism in Africa is actually resorting to small gains, relapse, and the most dangerous one, which I find appalling, is that it is resulting to more constrictions. And if we take a good look at the NSAS protest in Nigeria, I think this actually explains the case of the NSAS protest in Nigeria, where the Nigerian civic space. And one of the arguments I'm trying to put forward in this paper is that, so drawing from the NSAS and other cases in Africa, we have a situation where for Africans or nationals of African states to actually mobilize for protest as much as they did in previous times. And I mean, we have ample evidences to back this up. For instance, prior to the NSAS protest, I don't think we've ever had a situation in Nigeria where major tools of protest mobilization like Twitter were banned in Nigeria, or was banned rather in Nigeria. So the dilemma here, the challenge here is that the more authoritarian regimes have mastered the use of digital activism, digital technologies as tools of consolidating their hold and then engendering regime stability, the more the chances of using these technologies to effect changes, the more it becomes slimmer, across Africa. The next slide, please. Okay, so, and the next one, please. Explain. So I'll quickly round up by then putting forward the three propositions of this paper. The first one is that as much as African youth embark on protest, and these protests usually start with immediate triggers, African youth should learn to translate these immediate triggers into higher level demands that can address not just their immediate challenges, but the root causes. And by the root causes, I mean the institutions, the policies, the frameworks, the institutional frameworks that make protest inevitable. They should make demands in such a way that these institutions, these laws are actually addressed, and or challenges are actually addressed. And I think a good example, we experienced this during the NSAS protest, in which even though the protest started with immediate triggers, the protesters actually made higher level demands. But then beyond this, African youth need to use protest as avenue for them to break structural barriers, make demands that would allow them break structural barriers, institutional barriers to youth participation in governance, and flattening access to decision-making institutions of the government. So it's more of like people protest, and then governments make promises, and then oftentimes it stops there. without translating into the Kenyan protesters during the hashtag during the last the protest in Kenya over the finance bill. The protest was more successful compared with that of the NSAS, majorly because of this factor. The protesters actually monitored the implementation of the protest, even in the face of attacks, killings, and deaths, and much more than what we experienced in Nigeria during the NSAS protest. So, but then these are debatable issues, but these are the three propositions I'm putting forward as strategies for optimizing the gains or social change accruable from digital activism in Africa. Thank you.
Very beautiful presentation. So the next person would be the presentation from Kenya. I think that would be a good point to do a follow-up to your own presentation, because you ended with your arguments on the difference between this and the youth protest in Kenya and the Nigerian case with regards to digital activism. So I have trying to look for the presentation here. Oh, it's not been sent to me. So do we have the presenter here? Binet?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here, Prof.
Yes, your presentation slides.
I had sent
okay.
them. Do you have them all?
Okay, let me search again. I think I saw it.
Yeah, in fact, it was just mine and yours.
Yes. So let me get it again, please.
No
Just
problem.
give me a second. Yes.
She can also share a screen from my end. We have enabled that from here.
You're unable to do what?
If she wants to share a screen from my end, she can go ahead. We have
Okay. So you have enabled it from your side.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, but I have it here anyway.
Okay.
Yes. So, Dr. Lynette.
Yes, Prof.
The floor is yours now.
My screen is not there. We just still have the previous one.
The previous one? Okay, let me stop sharing now.
Yes.
Let me do it again. Can you see it now?
Still, almost. Yes. Thank you, Prof.
Yes, you are welcome.
Thank you. So, colleagues, I'm so excited to be part of this great group that is discussing democracy in Africa. And I'm looking at civil society and the protection of the democratic space in Africa. But I'm specifically looking at it from Kenya's point of view. And why I came up with this topic is because I went back to May 1963, and I was looking at, I was reading some of the speeches from our founders, the founders of Africa. And the one that impressed me most was the one from Kwame Nkrumah. And he was talking about the need for Africa to fight ignorance, disease, and poverty. But above all, to fight any form of disunity that may allow the white man to have space in recolonizing us. So while looking at that, I got interested in this topic called democracy. And I was thinking that even before I start presenting what I have, I need to caution us that even as we talk about declining or backsliding of democracy in Africa, we need to begin to redefine this democracy and what it really means for Africa. Because going by what we were given from the Berlin Conference, we are going to be looking at democracy in terms of participation, representation, and all that. But we have all this in Africa. In Kenya, for example, we have the constitution that has given us 47 counties, 47 governors, 47 deputy governors, 47 women reps, 47, and a number of MPs, MCAs, and still it's not working. So it means democracy for Africa actually means food on the table, health for citizens, education, employment opportunities, innovation spaces. So I went into this topic just to look at how did we become a bit democratic, and what is happening that we are going back. Are there lessons that we can learn? Next slide, Prof. So that is the format of my presentation, where I try to look at what is it that we can learn from what we have done before, because seemingly we are actually backsliding. Next slide. So just as an introduction, it's important to know that civil society in Africa is weak because it lacks resources. Some of the groups lack even proper education, and there's poor perception, especially by the political elite. And many civil society groups are not covered by constitutions in Africa. But ironically, you find that most of the leading politicians in Africa have a background in civil society activism. Next slide. So we are saying that although civil society is hated, but we find that without civil society, seemingly we are not going to move into democracy as it should be. Presently, countries like Kenya recognize and apportion a bit of some space for civil society. And this has elevated civil societies in Kenya to a certain level. Next slide. So civil society depends on donors. Many donors would like to strengthen democracy in Africa. But you bear me witness that most of those donors also have their own interests. So which interest will come first? Will it be democracy for the Kenyan, the country that they are supporting, or will it be their interest? But all the same, there is a push, for example, in Kenya, to register as many civil societies, and because they really help in mobilization of grassroots. It is evident from a long time ago. Let's go on. Next slide. So we've had civil society groups from the 60s, and they did not do very well because we had dictatorial systems. Like the first president of this country was very dictatorial, and we could not have civil society really thriving. But from the 70s is when we started having a very strong wave of civil society in Kenya, highly supported by churches and university student activists. Next slide. So churches, the National Council of Churches in Kenya has was very central in bringing democracy and fighting the one-party system in this country. I've talked about the university students. I've also talked about the Green Belt movement by Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Prize winner. But we also had writers' guilds, people who wrote Newsweek, weekly reviews, and society magazines. So scholars also played a very important role. So when we look at Kenya now, we want to see where are individuals like Wangari Maathai, what are students doing about it? Where is the church in Kenyan democracy at this moment? Let's move on. So there was need now for second liberation after the first liberation where the European left. But now we needed the second liberation because we needed to fight this single party system. And that is why university students, churches, individuals, and other civil societies came in and moved to bring out, to fight this KANU, the Kenya National Party that was really dictatorial. And at that time, we had problems of even trying, those who have come to Kenya, they were trying to take up Uhuru Park to build an industry. And they were trying to annex Karura Forest to build a I think, an industry for something. Let's go. Next slide. So we had the rise of what we called Mwakenya. Mwakenya was a clandestine movement based in Nairobi, but it was also based in the Scandinavian countries. It had people like Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, Professor the late Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and many others. Even Raila Odinga was also found in those Scandinavian countries. And this clandestine movement of Koigi wa Mwere and all that, they were against the state and became a rallying force that called for mobilization. And with the support of the NCCK, the national, the congregation of churches, they managed to really put pressure on the government at that time. Next slide. So as they continued with that movement of trying to put pressure on the government, there came what we call Sabasaba. Sabasaba simply means 7/7. So on 7th July every year, we have a holiday. And this was the climax where the people that I've mentioned there actually came together and they were out to form a movement, one movement that was going to remove this dictatorial leadership that we had in place. So we had the old guards and then we had the young Turks that actually came up with the Sabasaba movement. Next. Next slide. The Sabasaba movement was actually aimed at forming the Forum for Restoration of Democracy movement, which is called FORD. And this is what became a vehicle which had radical elements that championed the agenda of removing the ruling party at that time. And the movement brought together actors, civil society, religion, academicians, and called for reforms. What made this FORD movement very interesting is the last bullet on that slide, where it was supported by the ambassador, the US ambassador to Kenya, Hemston, who was also referred to on the corridors as the rogue ambassador. This ambassador openly supported the FORD movement. And you see, this is in the 90s when it is coinciding with the end of the Cold War. And therefore, there was a call from donors, the donors that were supporting this civil society. They were calling for democratization of the country's institutions. And the president then realized that he had to make negotiations. He was pushed to the wall because all the funds were going to the civil society, and the civil society was becoming very strong. And that led to the removal of Section 2A of the Constitution in 1992, which gave way to multi-party system. Next, let's finish. Next slide. Next. Yes, we are finishing. Next slide.
Yes, Dr. Lynette.
Yes.
So we have 3 minutes to go.
Yes. Yes. Let's just move.
Yes. Okay. Is it the slide?
Yeah. So President Moi, as we have seen, got a lot of pressure from the civil society and the donors. They channeled all the money through the civil society and forced President Moi to amend his relationship with the civil society. And that is how the regime now started working with the Kenya Human Rights Commission, International Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International, amongst others. Let's move on and finish. Let's move on. Let's go on, just move on because of time. Next. Next. So the champions of liberation achieved a lot of things that are mentioned in that PowerPoint, plus the paper that I've written. But this has gone down from the time that President Kibaki took up power. This has gone down, and with the handshake that came with it, the handshake was so shaky that it actually affected so much of the operation of the civil society. And this was made worse when the President Uhuru and the Deputy President William Ruto took over. This leadership did not allow civil society to thrive. And that is what has brought in the call for the third liberation, which is now being championed by what we are calling the Generation Z, the youths. because now this liberation is now being looked at as an economic liberation and not a political liberation. I think I should stop there because of time.
So within the short time left, so I would invite Dr. Al-Hassan Isa to make his own presentation. So if you have your slides with you, you can share directly from your side. But if you want me to do it for you, it's fine too.
I think I will appreciate if I do it, Professor Ken.
Excellent. And so we have 16 minutes to close the entire session. So,
Okay.
Dr. Al-Hassan, I hope you'll be kind enough
Yes.
to do the presentation in just about 10 minutes.
Let's see. So my name is Alasan Isa Surieni, and I'm also happy to join this panel in this conference. And then my presentation, I will depart more from the other four. I will not be talking about democracy, and then I also be talking about, presenting figures on results. So my presentation is titled Alienation and Conflict Among Agro-Pastoral Communities in Ghana, its implications on livelihood and peaceful coexistence in pastoral communities in Ghana. So this is the outline of my presentation. And I will begin with the introduction. So I think farmer-herder conflict is not peculiar to Ghana. It's happening in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Tanzania, in so many other African countries. So it has been a thorn in our flesh as far as the development of the African region is concerned. So people quest to understand farmer-herder conflicts have actually used two main theories. One, people have relied on the environmental scarcity theories, such as Kuhn's SL2 2019. Others have also used the political ecology, where people look at politics and ecology, how the two try to, drive farmer-herder conflict. And then the other approach has been the processual approach, where people look at farmer-herder conflicts emanating from the process of the relationship between farmers and herders. So one of the things that have, especially from the environmental scarcity theory, that has explained farmer-herder conflict is to look at farmer-herder conflict from the point of view of climate change. But one thing that we have not, literature has been very silent, is how alienation has caused farmer-herder conflict, how it's been influencing farmer-herder conflict within this sub-region. So in my paper, I depart from the usual rhetoric of looking at farmer-herder conflict from the point of view of climate change, to look at how alienation among pastoral households, how they are limited in terms of access to resources, how it's contributing to farmer-herder conflict, and how it also influences people's livelihood. So the objective of this particular paper were just two. One was to assess the perceived alienation among agro-pastoral households in the Ghanaian society. The second objective is to examine the effect of this resource alienation among agro-pastoral households on farmer-herder conflict. So these are the two main objectives that the paper sought to achieve. The state conducted in two districts within the central belt of Ghana. One, there's the Asante-Achim North municipality, and then the Sechura-Fram Plains districts within the central belt of Ghana. These are two adjoining districts. And I have to state that in Asante-Achim North municipality, herding has been banned. And for that matter, especially transhumans, herders that migrate from other parts of the country into this particular district, they have been banned from having herding activities within the district. So in Sechura-Fram Plains, which is just adjacent the Asante-Achim North municipality, they accept herding. And so most of them are moving into this particular area. So the choice of these two city areas were carefully selected. They were also selected. In terms of my sources of data, I relied on primary data, and I relied on multi-stage sampling technique. The two districts were purportedly selected, and within the two, so I ascertained the names of the communities from the district assembly, and with their assistance, I was able to cluster them into conflict prone and then non-conflict prone. Then we conducted mini census to identify the main households, their occupation. So we had farmer households and then the header household. Then I employed proportionate sample random sampling to be able to select 120 header households and then 180 farm households. So a total of 400 households were used for this particular study. And we also conducted focus group discussion, about 10, with farmer groups and then also header groups, before having 16 key informant interviews with the district officers and then also some people in academia. So in terms of the analytical framework, quantitative data, I use descriptive statistics and then also the perceived alienation index to be able to compute people's perceived alienation in terms of their access to resources. Then I use the t-test to test for significant differences in terms of people's alienation. That is the alienation between farmers and then the headers. Then the qualitative data, I use the asset theory that is based on Ribot and Peluso 2003. They define assets to mean the ability to benefit from things. And when they say things, this one is determined by the different bundles of power that various people or groups hold within the society. It has to do with how are you able to benefit from a given resource. So inherent in this particular theory is the fact that is the concept of alienation. And this concept of alienation explains the extent to which a person or a group of persons would have benefited from a resource but has been denied the access to this particular resource. So I use these two concepts to nuance the responses, the quantitative and the qualitative data. So for the perceived alienation index, my components were based on the level assets, that is the natural resources, human resources, social resources, physical resources, as well as financial resources. So there were components that I identified based on literature, and I asked farmers to households to respond using one, which means they are least alienated, that is, they are least denied, up to a scale of 5. Now, this is the result. I now go to my results. So in terms of the 5 sources, the 5 level access, that is natural resources, the result indicates that for in terms of how they are denied between farmer households and then header households, you realize that the results indicate that for natural resources, pastoral households are denied access to natural resources there before they are considered aliens as compared to farmer households. And that same thing applies to social resources. But when you look at physical, financial, and human resources, there's no difference between the alienation between farmer households and then header households. And overall, header households feel more alienated compared to header households. And I think this is what we see here. So now that these two, that is the natural resources and the social level resources, there are significant differences in the alienation between pastoral and farm households. I went deeper to see what is the cause. So in terms of the natural resources, I considered land and water. And then the social resources, I considered leadership, participation in decision making, group membership, then also isolation. So for the land, I realized that farmers are more alienated. That is, they are denied access to land more than migrant pastoralists. And the reason is that mostly chiefs are interested in money. And so within the city area, most of the farmers that are there are considered migrants. And so chiefs tend to give out land to those who have more money than the others. So that is the only place that you will see farmers being more alienated than headed. For the others, that in terms of access to water, group membership, decision making, and then leadership, you realize that pastoralists are feel more alienated compared to farmer groups. I tried to probe further and through the qualitative data. And during focus group discussion with farmers, they said that the landowners in this community like money, and pastoralists have more money than we, the migrant crop farmers. So the chief like to allocate more land to pastoralists than farmers because they pay higher prices and also give the cattle, achieve cattle every year compared to crop farmers. So when farmers said this, I went further to ask headers just to confirm. So this was confirmed during their focus group discussion with pastoralists. And one of the focus group discussion, it was stated that we know the chief want money for grazing on their land, and we are ready to pay and even give them cattle as their annual rent. So later on, when I was interviewing the chiefs, in one of my interviews, one of the chiefs stated that a pastoralist pay us more money for grazing than what the crop farmers pay for cultivating crops on the land. For example, a flanner header can pay a cow per cow in a year, which is worth more than the cost paid by 10 farmers for cultivating on the same piece of land. So we gain more by giving out our land to the pastoralists and farmers. So all these things mean that in terms of land, farmers are denied access to land compared to pastoralists. And the reason is that pastoralists are able to pay more compensation to landowners than farmers. Then I went further to see how alienation in terms of resources can contribute to farmer-header conflict. So the results indicate that I asked the question: have you engaged in any conflict with another household as a result of being feeling alienated over resource over assets of land? So about 46%.
You should be rounding off now.
Yes, don't worry. So this particular
please continue.
Yes, yes. So the major contributory factor of alienation to farmer-header conflicts comes from denial to land, water, and then also farm pastoralists feeling isolated from the other community members. So the other part of my study look at how this alienation can contribute to agro. Its implication on democracy. So in my result, about 42% of Fulani, especially Fulani headers, have indicated that they do not have Ghana card. And out of these 42%, 24 of them said that they were not able to register for the Ghana card because of the fear that they will be denied access by the registration officers, or they will feel. I mean, when they go there, officers will treat them as aliens because they think Ghana card is for just Ghanaians. So what is the implication of this on democracy? So the implication is that pastoralists are not given fair representation in terms of community leadership, and then also for them to be able to contribute to election because they are denying the opportunity to register for voter registration card just because they don't have the Ghana card. And the complication is that in the 2024 election, the Electoral Commission of Ghana introduced a constitutional instrument that identified the Ghana card as the sole document to be used to register for voter ID card, which will be what you can use to register. So what this one simply means is that, the pastoral households are alienated. They are denying the right to participate in election, that is democracy. So in conclusion, I argue that there is high denial in accessing resources among pastoralists and farmers, and it is because they are considered aliens. And this has a tendency of, fueling farmer-header conflict. So for that matter, interventions within this particular area should focus on promoting social cohesion and then also enhancing access to livelihood resources, especially land and water, among households, especially the pastoralist households. I think that these are some of my references. Thank you very much for your
audience. That was insightful and very useful. Thank you very much. So by the time here, I think we have just 1 minute left to 7 p.m. from our own time in here. So we won't be able to have discussions after the presentations anymore. So what I will just do is to do a summary of what we have discussed so far, and we'll be extending the discussion beyond this particular gathering. You know, we'll have our discussions at different forums at the level of the SSLC. So I think we have all concluded, based on the presentations, that there is need for us to pay attention to state institutions in Africa. The state of institutions in Africa at the moment is very weak, and it has become one of the driving factors behind democratic backsliding. Then the three next presenters after mine, they all seem to focus on the issue of civil society, the significance of civil society to strengthening democracy on the continent using different case studies. Dr. Dari's presentation, offer some insights into the issue of digital activism and the role of youth in strengthening democracy on the continent. So the case study of Kenya too focuses on civil society, but there is some emphasis on the politics around civil society and how we need to pay attention to that in a bid to strengthen democracy. So the last presenter, raises an important question that has to do with the issue of inclusion as it relates to the pastoralist in Ghana. One of the features of post-1990s democratization in Africa is the issue of lack of inclusion of marginalized groups. And this lack of inclusion has been a major factor behind conflicts that are causing insecurity in many parts of the continent. So on this point, I want to appreciate every one of you for your presentations. Kate has sent an email to me that you would have to compile all of these and use them for a special issue that will be published by the SSLC. After this session, you might get email from me or from Kate for a revised version of your papers. What we have in some cases are just slides for you to develop the paper and also revise some of them so that we can publish them in an edited issue. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. All right, bye-bye.
Do you need anything from me?
I was actually hoping to take some quick questions and comments, but then it's okay, since the time is already.
Okay, because I was looking at time. This is 7.
Time to spare extra 5 minutes before the end of the session.
Okay, you give us extra 5 minutes. If you people want to ask questions, the presenters are still around. You can send your questions.
I think someone left already, so maybe we are just going to make the announcements. Whoever wants to reach can always switch via emails.
You send the questions to me. I'll get them to respond to them, then send to the response.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Wonderful evening.